Oculus Rift S for £299. Sounds like a good deal, but who's it for exactly? Well, let me know what you think, to be honest, and I'll share my thoughts now, and you guys can share your thoughts afterwards. It was £499, no, it was £399. It's got £100 off, £299, which makes it the same price as the Quest 2 64 gig version. Now, it's going to be a tricky VR headset to compare with other headsets because we've got the price sort of difference between these cheaper ones and then things like the Valve Index that are £1,000. And then we've got the Quest 2, which is cheap, but it's wireless and standalone, whereas no other headset is. So how do we kind of compare what's good and what's not when they're all different prices and they all do different things? So the Rift S, let's just have a quick summary of its good points, shall we? So the Halo head strap is good, it's easy to adjust, it's quite comfortable. It's the same one Lenovo used on the PlayStation VR headset. That's positive. The tracking's good. The inside tracking from Oculus, or Facebook now, has always been the best as far as inside-out tracking goes. So that's still good. It's actually got a fifth camera on the top that the Quest 2 doesn't even have. But you know, the Quest 2 has four, one on each corner, so it kind of covers the same area and they work pretty much the same. So tracking's good. The strap is good. The screen itself is an RGB stripe matrix screen, albeit it's only one panel, also a bit like the Quest 2 in actual fact. It is lower resolution than what the Quest 2 is and what the G2 is, and even slightly less than the Valve Index. But this is going to be one of the reasons why I think people might actually buy it, and I'll get onto that in a minute. The audio is still pants, just the same as what it is in the Quest 2 and the Quest 1. And the controllers, they're you know, the Rift controllers, they're not quite as comfortable, I think, as the Quest 2 controllers or the original Rift controllers. They are a little bit smaller and the battery covers do like to pop off under frantic gaming. But all round, it's a pretty decent headset if you know, for the price, again, for the price. Throw on a pair of headphones and maybe some mammoth grips on your controllers and you've got a decent wired PC VR setup for not too much money. But now we roll forward from release, we roll forward to now, where there is the Quest 2 for £299 that can also be plugged into a PC using Link, and that if you can run it, gives a very good PC VR experience, and it has similar quality speakers. The strap isn't as good, you need to buy the Elite strap, so that bumps the price up £50 more straight away. The speakers are still pants, and the controllers, in my opinion, are actually more comfortable and slightly better. The battery covers don't pop off. They're a little bit chunky and they just feel nicer in the hand, or at least in my hands. So why would you choose a Rift S over a Quest 2 for PC VR use? So this is going to be the first thing that separates the two. If you want wireless functionality or standalone functionality, then obviously the Rift S is of no use to you whatsoever because it isn't wireless and it isn't standalone. So we're going to have to ignore those people straight away. People that want wireless and standalone, leave the room. It's not for you. The Rift S is no good. If you've got a £3,000 gaming PC with an RTX 3090 and a 5900X CPU and 32 gig of RAM, you'd probably stick with another slightly higher end wired headset. Maybe you'll go Valve Index, maybe you'll go G2 if you're not so worried about tracking and controllers, or maybe you'll go Quest 2 using it over Link because you know you can turn the settings all the way up to maximum, get a pin sharp display, and also really good in-game graphical fidelity because you've got the horsepower to run it. And if you can do that and you compare a Quest 2 or a G2 or an Index to the Rift S, you're going to have a nicer experience in all those other three headsets. Now obviously the G2 and the Index are a lot more money, but if you can afford a £3,000 gaming PC, you can probably afford a G2 or a Valve Index, and you can certainly afford a Quest 2. So again, we're starting to narrow down who might actually benefit from a Rift S here. You mustn't want wireless functionality, and you mustn't have deep pockets because you can afford the best of the best when it comes to PC hardware. Because if you try and use a Quest 2 as a PC VR headset, or a G2 or an Index even, you're going to need over and above what I'm going to call normal PC gaming sort of setup. You're going to have a high-end gaming PC to get the most out of those headsets, especially the Quest 2 and the G2, because of how high the resolution of those screens are. If you want to try and run at as close to the native resolution of those screens as is possible to get the sharpest image, and you've got anything less than a 3080 or around that sort of power, even a 2080 Ti is not good enough, you won't be able to run AAA VR titles with the graphics fidelity turned all the way up. If you're going to play Half-Life Alyx, if you're going to play Star Wars Squadrons, Zero Caliber, you won't be playing at native resolution, and by that I mean, see my other videos, it's complicated. Rendering it at 1.7 in the Oculus software so that when you view it, it's as close to native resolution in the middle of the displays as is possible. Gives you the sharpest image. You won't be running it at that, and then the game settings on high or ultra, you're going to be down on medium, possibly even low. Because to run at maximum fidelity in-game and as close to native as possible, you literally need the very best of the best of what's available literally today. The G2 even slightly more so than the Quest 2 because that resolution is even a little bit higher. The Index not quite so much because that is a lower resolution, so people with 2080 Ti should be all right with an Index. But again, it's a £1,000 setup. If you're looking at a Rift S for $299, you're probably not then going to stretch to £1,000. So really, we're looking at people who have got, 300 quid to spare. Do they go Rift S for PC VR, or do they choose a Quest 2, because they're not worried about standalone functionality, because again, you just buy the Quest 2. So I think the Rift S really is only for people who don't want wireless functionality or standalone functionality, and who have normal spec gaming PCs. Maybe people with a 1080 or a 1070, graphics card. Something from a couple of years ago, maybe even going back to the 980 Ti's. They're never going to run the Quest 2 flat out. You're going to have to bring your render resolution down, and you're going to have to bring your in-game settings down as well. Now, people have asked me in the comments before, if I bring the render resolution down to say 50%, Carl, on the Quest 2 or on a G2, because they're both really high res, and then I can have my in-game settings up, will that look better than a Rift S, which will quite happily run at native resolution with all the settings maxed out? And the answer to that is, depending exactly what resolution you have to run on your Quest 2 or your G2, yes, it will look better because there is less screen door effect on those two newer headsets. But this only scales back so far. 75% render resolution, probably still going to look better on the Quest 2 or the G2. Once you start getting to 50% or less, then the sharpness on the Quest 2 and the G2 really starts to disappear and things start to look a little bit blocky, and at that point, I would say stay, because some people ask me this when they already had a Rift S, should they upgrade? And I said at that point, if you can't run higher enough render resolution, stay with your Rift S, because it will be a far nicer experience to run the Rift S on maximum settings, ultra settings in your games, native resolution, a nice solid 80 Hertz. It's going to be a lovely visual experience versus scaling back your render resolution on your G2 or your Quest 2 and running medium settings, maybe high settings, just to try and hold 72 Hertz or 80 Hertz or 90 Hertz if you're on the G2. You're going to get a better experience with the Rift S. So this, I think, is where the current offer on the Rift S for $299 might appeal to some people. People who just don't have the money to buy £1,500 graphics cards. I don't have the money to buy a £1,500 graphics card. I've got a Quest 2 here and a G2. The G2 is going to be sold on because it's just not good enough, in my opinion. I can't afford a 3090 to run my Quest 2 at the proper resolution to get the most out of it. It's just too much money. I'm hoping that maybe going forward, perhaps the 3080 Ti will be, I say affordable, it's still going to be nigh on £1,000, isn't it, surely? The problem with the 3080 for me, the normal one, is there's just not enough RAM. It's only got 10 gig and that just isn't enough for high resolution VR in my opinion and experience. So I am holding out for something, and I am saving some money up to try and buy a new card as and when they're in stock, and as and when something comes along with enough VRAM that I think is going to be safe going forwards and that has the horsepower to run my Quest 2, you know, at a proper resolution, so it's pin sharp, and enable me to run high or ultra settings in the games. So I think that's where this Rift S is going to have its own little niche market here. You know, maybe you're a sim racer, and so you don't care about wireless functionality because you're going to be sat in your sim racing rig. Maybe you're a flight sim guy. Again, you're going to be sat in your rig with your HOTAS. You don't care about wireless connectivity. But what you do care about is how good everything looks, you know. And if you only got a sort of a normal spec PC, you know, even my 2080 isn't enough to run the Quest 2 flat out, you know. And that was considered a good card a year ago. So yeah, if you're one of those guys, and scaling back the render resolution to the point where it just makes everything look a bit crap, it's just not a good idea. I would rather have my Rift S running absolutely flat out with all the gloss on, all the lighting, all the shadows, high resolution textures, and have the best visual experience I can, albeit at a slightly lower resolution than the Quest 2 or the G2. But overall, my image quality is just better. So I think that's really where this Rift S will find a little home amongst people, whilst there's still stock, because Facebook have discounted this to get rid of their remaining stock. You know, technically it's going to be discontinued early to mid next year, and this isn't something I would worry about. My OG Rift, my CV1, still worked perfectly fine on the latest Oculus software and runs all the latest Steam VR games, all the latest Oculus games. Just because they don't sell a product anymore, you know, doesn't mean it's not going to work anymore. So I wouldn't worry about buying a Rift S now going, oh no, it's going to be discontinued in a few months. Will it stop working? It's not going to stop working. No, don't be ridiculous. Don't panic about that. It's going to work, you know, for at least, I mean, I'm only guessing, I don't know. It's going to work for at least 3 or 4 years. I can't see why they would just suddenly do a software update that stops the Rift S and even the OG Rift, the CV1, from working, you know. Because the CV1, if you can pick one up for 100 quid, 125 quid, that's still a good experience in VR. That's comfortable, you got your IPD adjustment, you got your nice controllers, the tracking's good if you don't mind the cameras being around the room, and the audio's good. Yes, the resolution is low, and yes, the screen door effect is very prevalent compared to modern headsets, but when you're not paying a lot of money, you don't have to worry. You know, if you're a low spec gamer, maybe you've only got, I don't know, a 1060 graphics card, or even a 1050 Ti, you can just about run an OG Rift using one of those with a comparable CPU. So there's still a reason and a market for those, to be honest with you. Anyway, I'm getting slightly sidetracked here. But yeah, my thoughts are that niche market for the Rift S. People who don't want wireless, people with normal spec gaming PCs who want to be able to run things flat out and get a really good visual experience without having to buy a modern headset and turn everything down and sort of regret the purchase. It's like, well, yes, I've got a Quest 2, it was $299, but when I plug it into my PC, everything looks like crap because I've had to scale it back so far. It's like, no, you should have just got yourself a Rift S if you weren't worried about wireless standalone functionality and been happy that you can run everything on Ultra and have a good time. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd be interested to see whether any of you are maybe thinking about buying a Rift S because of that price and for the reasons that I've just mentioned. You know, you'd rather have maximum fidelity in game at a slightly lower res than a higher res that you have to run at half resolution or less that looks a bit pants because everything's turned down to medium. So yeah, just thought I'd have a little natter about that. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching and take it easy.